Embarking on this new chapter in my life, I found myself grappling with feelings of loneliness and neglect. Married to a man whose career demands often left him absent from our home life, I struggled to remember the last time we had shared a moment of true connection. His presence had become sporadic, his mind preoccupied, conversations short and distracted. This growing chasm in our relationship left me yearning for attention and emotional intimacy, elements that had once defined our union. Simultaneously, my professional life presented a stark contrast. Here, I was engaged, valued, and heard. My boss, with whom I spent countless hours collaborating on projects, had become a significant figure in my daily routine. His consistent appreciation for my work and his efforts to engage with me on a personal level filled the void my marriage couldn't seem to bridge anymore. Our conversations often veered from professional to personal, weaving a tapestry of mutual respect and understanding. As days turned into months, I found myself looking forward to work with a sense of anticipation that went beyond professional duties. It was at the office where I felt seen and acknowledged, a stark departure from the emotional solitude I encountered at home. This growing dependency on my work interactions for emotional fulfillment was both comforting and confusing. It provided a respite from the loneliness, but also muddled the boundaries between professional and personal satisfaction. This internal conflict was a constant companion, whispering doubts about my happiness and the sustainability of relying on my work environment for emotional support. Yet, each day, as I left the quiet of my undershared home for the vibrancy of my bustling office, I felt a temporary reprieve from my domestic dissatisfaction. The contrast between the warmth of my interactions at work and the coolness of my home life painted a vivid picture of the companionship I craved but wasn't receiving where I needed it most. Navigating this complex web of emotions and relationships, I remained acutely aware of the precariousness of my situation. The attention I received at work, especially from my boss, was a soothing balm, yet I knew it was a temporary solution to a deeper, more pervasive issue. As I continued on this path, I carried a mix of gratitude for the solace I found at work and a gnawing guilt for the growing emotional disconnect at home. Navigating my daily routine at work, I found solace in the dynamics I shared with my boss, which gradually evolved from strictly professional exchanges to more personal interactions. Each project we undertook together not only showcased our compatibility in our professional roles, but also seemed to underscore a growing rapport that extended beyond the confines of office tasks. His keen interest in my opinions and well-being contributed to a workplace atmosphere that felt increasingly supportive and engaging. This development was subtle at first, marked by small gestures and conversations that strayed into personal territory during coffee breaks or late work evenings. We shared insights into our lives outside work, discussing hobbies, books, and occasionally our personal challenges. These exchanges revealed mutual interests and viewpoints, laying the groundwork for a camaraderie that I found both surprising and immensely comforting. As the months passed, our interactions became highlights of my day. He had a way of making me feel appreciated and understood, qualities I found lacking in my interactions at home. It was not just the acknowledgement of my professional contributions, but also his empathetic approach to discussions about personal aspirations and frustrations that deepened my appreciation for him. His presence became a potent antidote to the feelings of invisibility I battled in my personal life. This emotional connection began filling the void that my marital relationship no longer addressed. Where silence had become the norm at home, I found engaging dialogue and laughter at work. Where I felt overlooked by my husband, my boss offered recognition and encouragement. This contrast between my home and work life became increasingly stark, driving me to cherish the hours spent at work and view them as a refuge from the growing loneliness I experienced elsewhere. Yet, with this realization came a creeping discomfort, an awareness of the blurring lines between professional and personal boundaries. I found myself in a precarious position, balancing on the thin line between seeking emotional support and stepping into an emotional entanglement that could have professional repercussions. The need for emotional connection was undeniable, yet the context in which it was evolving presented a complex array of ethical and personal dilemmas that I grappled with daily. On that pivotal day, the scenario was innocuously set for an afternoon of routine work, with a project deadline requiring undivided attention and collaboration. My boss, ever the supportive leader, suggested bringing our work session to my home, considering the late hour anticipated due to the workload. This arrangement was not unusual in the context of our previous collaborations, yet the personal setting of my home imbued the meeting with an informal tone, breaking away from the structural confines of the office environment. As we delved into the project, the comfort of being at home seemed to enhance our productivity and the ease of our interactions. We were in a familiar rhythm, discussing strategies and outcomes with a fluency that came from months of closely working together. However, the relaxed ambiance also subtly shifted the dynamics of our relationship. The professional barriers we typically navigated with ease became less pronounced, replaced by a camaraderie that blurred the lines between boss and friend. Throughout the afternoon, as we shared coffee and casual banter between intense sessions of focused work, I found myself increasingly aware of his presence in a way that was distinctly different from the office setting. The proximity and isolation of my home environment amplified feelings I had previously managed to compartmentalize. It was as though the familiar setting of my home, combined with the isolation from our usual professional boundaries, unwittingly fostered a more personal connection. This shift was gradual but undeniable, a slow progression from professional respect to personal rapport that quietly crossed into ambiguous territory. The turning point came unexpectedly. In a fleeting moment of shared laughter over a successfully resolved work issue, the atmosphere tipped from professional to personal, catching us both off guard. It was a moment that, under normal circumstances, would have been inconsequential, a brief, shared connection over mutual success. However, in the privacy and isolation of my home, it sparked an undercurrent of tension that neither of us was prepared to address at the moment. The realization that our relationship could be veering into risky emotional territory was both startling and unsettling. I was acutely aware of the potential repercussions, both personally and professionally. Yet, the emotional vulnerability fostered by our surroundings, combined with existing undercurrents of unaddressed sentiments, set the stage for decisions that could redefine the boundaries of our relationship. Navigating the undercurrent of newfound feelings with my boss in the sanctity of my home felt surreal. Amid our work-centric conversation, a suggestion to unwind momentarily from the day's stress seemed innocuous enough. The idea was simple: a quick refresh under the shower to clear our minds and re-energize for the rest of our tasks. The rationale seemed sound. We had been working for hours, and a reset was practical. However, the proposal was laden with unspoken implications, given the privacy and intimacy of the setting. The decision to agree wasn't made lightly. I wrestled internally with the appropriateness of such a situation. Rationalizations flitted through my mind, each one a feeble attempt to overlay a veneer of professionalism on a scenario that was anything but. I told myself that the boundaries we were pushing were still within the realm of reason, that this was merely a pragmatic solution to physical and mental fatigue. Yet, as we proceeded, a part of me was acutely aware of the transgression against conventional boundaries. It wasn't just about sharing a space meant for solitude, but also about how this act could be perceived outside the vacuum of our current rationalizations. The tension between professional decorum and the personal closeness we had inadvertently cultivated was palpable. With each step toward this compromising scenario, I found myself justifying the decision with reminders of our mutual respect and the understanding we had fostered over months of working together. This was an anomaly, a deviation from norm dictated by unusual circumstances, or so I persuaded myself. The dynamics of power, responsibility, and vulnerability intersected, creating a complex web of emotions and decisions. As the reality of what was happening settled in, Mixed emotions surged. There was an undeniable thrill to the spontaneity and the breaking of norms, yet it was shadowed by a looming sense of impropriety and the potential consequences that could ripple outward, affecting not just my marriage, but also my career. This moment of shared vulnerability was a pivot point, one that could redefine the very nature of our relationship and the paths we would choose moving forward. At that moment, when the unexpected sound of the front door opening echoed through the house, a sharp spike of adrenaline surged through me. The normalcy of hearing the door at any other time clashed violently with the current, highly inappropriate circumstances. My mind raced as the reality of my husband's premature return from work set in, shredding through the facade of justifiable reasons for our current situation. Instantly, I was acutely aware of every small sound, every movement, as if the quiet opening of the door amplified into a deafening alert. The casual ambiance that had momentarily blurred lines between right and wrong snapped into harsh clarity. My heart pounded with the realization of the potential consequences, and a cold wave of panic washed over me. The seconds following felt surreal, stretched, and distorted, as if time had slowed down to let the gravity of the situation sink in. My immediate instinct was to rectify the appearance of what was happening, to somehow normalize the scene before my husband could piece together the reality of his unexpected discovery. As I heard the familiar footsteps approaching, a flurry of thoughts overwhelmed me. How to explain, what to say, how to mitigate the damage. The simplicity of our initial intentions, however misguided they had become, now seemed impossible to communicate without doubt or suspicion. This sudden intrusion of my husband into this scene was a stark intrusion of reality into a moment that should never have happened. The comfort and security I always felt in his presence were replaced by a churning mix of fear and regret. The need to address the situation head-on, to explain and hopefully salvage what could quickly unravel into a disastrous misunderstanding, pressed urgently against the panic that threatened to silence me. In those critical moments, the weight of decisions, both past and impending, bore down with overwhelming intensity. The clarity that comes with crisis illuminated the profound misstep of judgment that had led to this precarious moment. Now, faced with the imminent confrontation, the challenge was not only to explain, but to confront the deeper issues in our relationship that had led us here. The moment my husband appeared, the air thickened with tension and unspoken questions. His expression, one of confusion edging into dismay, mirrored the chaos of my own emotions. The words to explain, to diffuse the tension, seemed to evaporate under his searching gaze. It was as if the walls of our home, once filled with the warmth of our shared life, now bore witness to a profound betrayal. His voice, when he finally spoke, was a mix of hurt and incredulity. The questions he asked were pointed, a direct reflection of the shock and betrayal that coursed through him. Each word he uttered felt like an echo of the internal turmoil I was experiencing, highlighting the gravity of the misunderstanding and the potential rift it could cause in our relationship. I struggled to formulate a response that could convey both the truth and my remorse. The explanations I offered, framed in haste, sounded hollow and insufficient even to my own ears. I attempted to articulate the innocence of the initial intent, how a moment of misguided judgment had spiraled into the compromising scenario he had walked into. Yet, the more I explained, the more I realized the depth of the fissure this incident could create in our marriage. Amid the tense exchange, it was clear that the implications were more profound than the immediate shock. This was not merely about a singular lapse in judgment, but touched on deeper issues in our relationship, my feelings of neglect, and the emotional distance that had crept between us, which I had failed to communicate effectively. The conversation painfully underscored how disconnected we had become, how the foundation of our trust and communication had eroded to a point where my decisions could be so misaligned with the values we had built our life upon. As he listened, his initial anger gave way to a pained resignation, a sign that this revelation was not just about anger, but disappointment and sadness at the state of our union. The fallout from this incident, I realized, would extend beyond the day's events and would require serious introspection and commitment from both of us if there was any hope of reconciliation and healing. This confrontation, though heart-wrenching, was perhaps a necessary catalyst for addressing the underlying currents that had led us here, a painful but honest beginning to rebuilding what had been damaged. In the quiet aftermath of the confrontation, a profound sense of regret settled over me. The intensity of the moment had faded, leaving behind a stark clarity about the consequences of my actions. Alone with my thoughts, I was forced to confront the reality of the situation I had created and the potential loss of the most important relationship in my life. The gravity of my choices weighed heavily on me, each thought tinged with remorse. This period of reflection brought a deeper understanding of the motivations behind my actions. I realized that the emotional distance in my marriage, which I had often lamented in silence, had driven me to seek validation and connection elsewhere. However, the clarity of hindsight made it painfully apparent that I had chosen a destructive path, mistaking temporary attention for a solution to deeper emotional needs. The momentary escape I thought I found in the company of another was nothing compared to the enduring partnership I had jeopardized. As I pondered the fallout, the guilt was overwhelming. I had not only betrayed my husband's trust, but had also compromised my own principles. The implications of my choices extended beyond my personal turmoil. They threatened the foundation of our life together. The trust we had built over the years, once seemingly unshakable, now felt fragile and uncertain. The fear of losing my marriage became all-consuming. I was gripped by the realization that my actions might have irreparably damaged the bond I cherished most. The thought of my husband's pain, caused by my indiscretion, was haunting. I struggled with the knowledge that I had inflicted such hurt on someone I loved deeply, all because I had failed to communicate my feelings and seek resolution within our relationship. This moment of truth was a painful but necessary reckoning with myself and my actions. It forced me to evaluate not only the immediate consequences, but also the underlying issues in our marriage that needed addressing. The journey ahead, I knew, would require honesty, vulnerability, and a commitment to healing and rebuilding, if such a path was still open to us. The road to redemption would be long and uncertain, but it was a path I was prepared to take, driven by the hope of forgiveness and the desire to restore the love and trust that had once defined our union. In the wake of the personal crisis, the professional ramifications also began to unfold. My relationship with my boss, once a source of support and camaraderie, now stood under the harsh light of scrutiny. The boundary that had been crossed cast a long shadow over our interactions, altering the dynamic irrevocably. The ease and comfort that had characterized our collaboration were replaced by a cautious formality, a necessary adjustment to realign our professional boundaries. The shift was palpable in every meeting, every conversation. We both recognized the need to redefine our working relationship, to steer it back to a strictly professional realm. This recalibration was not just about maintaining decorum, but about preserving our careers and reputations. The realization that our personal indiscretion could have significant professional consequences added another layer of complexity to the situation. Dealing with this change required a new level of professionalism and discretion. I had to navigate the delicate balance between acknowledging the past and moving forward. It was crucial to demonstrate that my capabilities and contributions to the team were not overshadowed by this lapse in judgment. I focused on delivering high-quality work, on proving my value to the team as a dedicated and capable professional. This period was also a time for introspection about the role of leadership and the responsibilities that come with it. It was clear that as a leader, my boss also grappled with the implications of our actions. The need for him to model integrity and professionalism was paramount, not just for his own career, but for the morale and functioning of our entire team. The situation served as a stark reminder of the influence and impact leaders have on their teams and the importance of ethical leadership. As we both worked through the complexities of reestablishing a professional rapport, the broader professional implications became a topic of quiet speculation among colleagues. The challenge was to manage this speculation and to ensure it did not erode the trust and respect of our team. This effort to manage perceptions and maintain professional integrity was taxing but necessary, serving as a critical learning experience in managing personal integrity in a professional context. Through this challenging time, the importance of clear boundaries, professional integrity, and ethical leadership were lessons that resonated deeply, shaping my approach to professional relationships going forward. Reaching out to my husband to bridge the gap that had formed between us was fraught with apprehension and humility. The initial shock and hurt had settled into a quieter, but no less intense need for resolution. My approach was to initiate a conversation that was as much about listening as it was about expressing my own regrets and desires for our future. The aim was to create a space where we could both feel heard, a necessary foundation for any hope of reconciliation. In these discussions, I emphasized my remorse, recognizing how my actions had endangered the trust and foundation of our marriage. I spoke candidly about my feelings of neglect and isolation, explaining that these were not excuses for my behavior, but contexts that I had failed to communicate effectively. I acknowledged that my choices were misguided and had led us to this painful juncture. To demonstrate my commitment to our relationship and to rebuilding trust, I suggested engaging in couples therapy. It was important to me that we had a professional space to explore our issues, guided by someone who could help us navigate our feelings and the dynamics of our relationship with objectivity. This suggestion was also a signal of my investment in the process, an acknowledgement that the path to healing was one we could not walk alone. Throughout these conversations, I was careful to give my husband the space to express his hurt and disappointment. I listened intently, without defense, to his concerns and the impact of my actions on his sense of security in our relationship. This listening was crucial, as it validated his feelings and demonstrated my respect for his experience, which was central to the healing process. I also took proactive steps to reinforce the sincerity of my intentions. This included setting clear boundaries with my boss and limiting our interactions to professional contexts, ensuring transparency in all my communications, both personal and professional. I shared these changes with my husband, showing him that I was taking concrete actions to rectify my missteps and safeguard our relationship from similar threats in the future. My efforts to seek forgiveness were grounded in a deep appreciation of the gravity of my actions and their impact on our marriage. I understood that regaining my husband's trust would take time and consistent effort, and I was fully committed to that process, whatever the outcome. My hope was that through open communication, professional guidance, and a shared commitment to our relationship, we could gradually restore the intimacy and trust that had been compromised. In the weeks that followed, the weight of my actions remained a constant presence, shaping every conversation and interaction with my husband. The road to rebuilding trust was slow, filled with moments of hesitation, doubt, and deep reflection. While he was willing to engage in discussions about our future, the wounds left by my betrayal did not fade quickly. His pain was evident in the way he spoke, the guardedness in his tone, and the way he carefully chose his words. I knew that forgiveness, if it ever came, would not be immediate. Through therapy, we unraveled the layers of disconnect that had built over time, exposing the quiet resentments and unmet needs that had driven us apart. I came to understand that while my choices were my own, they were symptoms of deeper issues within our marriage, conversations that were left unspoken, intimacy that had been lost in the chaos of daily life, and emotional needs that neither of us had fully addressed. For the first time in years, we faced these truths together, no longer burying them under routine or avoidance. I took active steps to change the patterns that had contributed to this fracture. I distanced myself from my boss entirely, choosing to leave my position and start fresh in a different workplace. This decision was not just about eliminating temptation or avoiding awkwardness, but about demonstrating my commitment to my marriage, A new environment allowed me to redefine my focus and establish boundaries that honored my commitment to rebuilding trust. Beyond my professional life, I made conscious efforts to prioritize my relationship with my husband in a way I hadn't before. I communicated more openly, expressed gratitude frequently, and took time to foster the closeness that had once been the foundation of our love. I stopped assuming that love alone would sustain us, and instead actively worked to nurture it, making sure that complacency never again became an excuse for emotional distance. Though progress was made, I understood that some things, once broken, could never return to their original form. The experience had changed us both, reshaped our marriage, and left behind scars that would always serve as reminders of what we had endured. Whether our relationship would fully recover remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. I would never again take love, trust, or commitment for granted. Every day moving forward would be a chance to prove, through actions rather than words, that I had learned from my mistakes.